Assalamu alaikum, men and women. It's good to be back on screen. Today is a great day as it marks the release of the final video under the series Time, the volume Time Equivalence. What is that, you may ask? Well, it's a theory on how volume is related to time. If you're wondering like, hey, isn't that proven already where time must exist, where space exists, and how time bends with it, etc., etc. Well, this is something different. Suppose space is the area, volume is what fills that area, and is how that said volume influences time, or vice versa. This is something that would pique the interest of people who like science, especially physics, math, and even philosophy, because I think that this can give you a better insight on what the universe has to offer. Also, I think that this is somewhat legit, or in other terms verified, because I've submitted this theory as a report to my university during second year, and surprisingly it was the assignment that I scored highest during my degree career. So yeah, I feel like it's somewhat approved and have the need to share it for quite some time now. This began a long time ago when I first noticed the similarities between a solar system and an atom. How their structures bear similar components, where the sun would resemble the nucleus, being the centerpiece and large in size, and the orbiting planets are the electrons, which are relatively light and small in size compared to the first. I found this very interesting. Like, have you ever wondered whether our solar system could be an atom of something far bigger, or some sort of fractal occurrence maybe? Fractals are patterns that exist in large as well as small scales. Symmetry that expands or unfolds. One example would be the golden ratio. We see it in shells, we see it in tornadoes, we also see it in the Milky Way. I'd talk more about the golden ratio, but that's not the main point. Plus, there are numerous other videos that covers the information regarding it in more details. However, back to what I've just said, who else had this sort of thought regarding whether the solar system is an atom of something far larger? Let me know down in the comments below. Despite all that, it can be accepted that they follow the same concept, except for a few notable differences, which are its size and the time period in which the orbiting components complete a full circle around the center point. A fraction of a second for an electron, a whole year for the planet Earth to revolve around the sun. From here we can see how volume is related to time. The bigger it is, the slower it seems to move. We see this trait in a lot of things. Take a small fly for an example. You as a human, a larger being, would struggle to swat it using your bare hands, because from its perspective, it probably sees you as a slow-moving creature. Similar to how we would perceive the blue whale, a slow yet majestic big creature, in its shoes, it probably views us just as how we would view flies. Fast, fidgety, annoying little pest. I'm just kidding. In other words, this could be called time dilation, where the observer is observing a different passage of time compared to a different observer, and how the size of the observer could be affecting the time observed. Now take a moment and think about what other things you could relate this idea with, and judge for yourself whether you agree with it or not. So I've got this theory, right? Being intrigued in it, I shared with it to some of my friends because I wanted to hear, their opinions on it too. And one of them told me that if you want to legit prove something, you gotta have equations, because it's the universal way of conveying facts with math. And man, was I bummed. Like, bro, I'm just a kid. How do I derive equations? How do I even begin? I was shut down. So I spent the time after in my room, sad, contemplating about what's been said. And there was this poster that's been in my dorm room ever since I moved in. It said, imagination. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. Followed by Albert Einstein, the man famous for the equation E is equals to mc squared, where E is energy, m is mass, and c is the speed of light. The theory of relativity. How does he come up with that? As I stared at it longer, it finally clicked. With mass, you can get volume, and with speed, you can get time. Basic physics. And through substitution, we can actually relate volume with time through an equation derived from Einstein's theory of relativity. In high school physics, we learned that to be able to prove the legitimacy of an equation, it must be homogeneous. Homogeneous means that the units on the left side must equal with the units on the right side. And so this was my first act into justifying the newly made equation. Eventually we can see there's meter cube on the left hand side and ultimately meter cube as well on the right hand side. And that ties the knot. The equation is legit. What there is to note about the relationship between volume and time is that volume, as you can see here, is inversely proportional to frequency squared. This is the relationship between frequency and time. Suppose other factors are kept constant, and having these two as variables, an increase in volume of the system would result in the experienced time to exponentially get bigger. It supports the hypothesis that I made earlier regarding the comparison of the solar system and an atom, where the bigger it is, the slower it moves, the smaller it is, the faster it moves. This means that even the small relative difference in the size could cause a drastic change in how the law of time is obeyed. For example, let's give you this gear scenario where one of the gear is the energy source, and there's a bigger gear and then there's a smaller gear. Of course, the bigger gear would rotate at a slower pace, whereas the small gear would rotate at a higher frequency given the energy source is the same. I hope that is clarified. With that in mind, I believe that this could prove a wide range of things that is yet to be understood that are time or frequency dependent, such as why dogs have dog ears or foxes have fox ears. Different sized animals aging at different pace. Now that is just one point. Changing the time variable back to frequency, we could see different hypotheses raised when relating it back to volume. One example would be the voice pitches or even the heart rates produced from different sized animals we can see that the smaller animals would produce higher pitched sounds and even faster heart rates. Think of it in terms of the frequency. It would be possible to acquire an approximate yet accurate value for these using the newly made equation, given the condition that proper values for the other variables are known. Well, here comes the question again. Is it possible? I myself have yet to figure that out, but I do want to. So I'm just putting this out there, and maybe sometime in the future, someone else could. I remember when I figured this out, I named the equation the frequency of life. As corny as that sounds, but it makes sense. On the other hand, light is a form of electromagnetic wave. And that is why I was able to submit this said theory as a coursework under the said subject in my university and got my work graded. A good friend told me that Moscow was not built in a single day. And that quote has motivated me to constantly find puzzle pieces under this said idea, the volume time equivalence, to eventually make it beneficial for the world. But that's about it. It's one way of understanding the well-known equation E is equals to mc squared from a different perspective, and maybe even allow you to see life differently. Appreciate it, live it, love it, because life is beautiful. And to conclude, that is how a single idea that has lingered in my brain, mixed with the right exposure from a poster that has unexpectedly appeared in my life out of the blue, turned into something big. Interesting? Well, you let me know. For those interested in this piece of information that I've just delivered and want to know more, I will include a link to the original document that I've submitted to the uni, and maybe you could learn from it. My points are more elaborated in there, including how sound frequencies could stimulate the growth in size of fruits and vegetables. It's like reverse engineering it rather than having the volume affect the frequency. It's not how the frequency is affecting the volume. Else, comment down below anything you want to share. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The next series will be about languages. I don't know when I'm gonna start on it. It depends. Thank you very much for your time. This is Fizz, man. Fizz out.